live. During the live streams. All right, everybody is in now. Okay, so do 1 second.
I just saw your Pepe Silva name, Nick.
Yeah, that's right.
Is
Only a
that
few
an
people are good
alias?
at- Sorta. You ever seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
No.
Okay, well, that's that is. How do I save it? Okay. We should be good to go now. So here, out of that. So, I'm going to make Eric the host. He's the host, so his connection's better than mine, so it should be smoother. Is it smoother?
People seem smooth on my end.
Yes.
Smooth, but it looks like Nick's just froze, right?
I don't know, Nick, wave your head.
Oh,
Yeah, I guess Nick went ahead and left us. You there, Nick?
I'm here.
Yeah, cool.
Hold on. I'm gonna make it so. Switch me back to the host real quick, Eric. Try something real quick.
Everyone looks good on my end.
Okay. Everybody looks good.
Yep.
Are we smooth?
Pretty smooth on my end.
Everybody? Okay, maybe it was just a little hiccup. Okay, we're live now. So let's just kind of start off. Everybody just kind of introduce themselves and their background and how it relates. Okay?
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'll go first. I'm Eric Thomas. I was a cadet at the Air Force Academy Preparatory School starting in 2008. I was class of 2013. I was disenrolled with an honorable discharge 6 weeks before graduation. So April of 2013. Since then, I've been trying to clear my name, clear my record, and hopefully get back to some service in the Air Force I was supposed to be flying. That's all I got.
cool.
Go ahead.
Oh, my name is Melissa Hildremyr. I was actually in Eric's squadron. I was at the Air Force Academy from June 2011 till about January 2014. While I was there, I was sexually assaulted my freshman year, and after that, dealt with years of harassment and retaliation. Eventually, they tried to railroad me out of there, but I decided to leave on my own terms, so I disenrolled with an honorable discharge and on the terms that I would not go to the media. Turns out a few years later, I ended up speaking on CBS about my experiences there when I saw that sexual assaults were still happening and it was still a huge systemic issue there. And then, yeah, I still keep in touch with Eric and Teresa, and this is still a subject that's I feel pretty passionate about, because it's something that's still ongoing in our military, especially service academies, and most extremely in the Air Force Academy.
So my name is Brandon Enos. I was Air Force Office of Special Investigations Special Agent. I actually worked with Eric Thomas and started Operation Gridiron.
Okay, I'm Teresa Beasley. Though you can't see me, I am here, which is the life of a SARC. I was the sexual assault response coordinator at the Air Force Academy for 10 years. Prior to that, I stood the program up for USAFE, Armed Forces Europe. I started the SAPR program there for all of our 8 bases and managed that program. Did a brief stint in civilian personnel, and then when I saw the academy job open, I thought I was going to the flagship, and instead I'm not sure what I was going to, but it was nothing what I thought it was, and I got into trouble there for basically being a whistleblower. The academy, one year we had 84 sexual assaults by just after spring break was starting, and that was a world record. The superintendent at a case management meeting told me, Teresa, that's too many reports. So, you know, I said, ma'am, I thought that was a good thing. Our prevalence is not up, but our reports are, and that's what we want. That wasn't the answer they wanted. So they went ahead and removed about 34 reports from the database, leaving us with 50. And when I blew the whistle on that, that's when they started investigating me. I was investigated 3 times. And then finally, I decided to retire in 2017. I saw where this was going. If I hadn't retired, I think they would have fired me. They did try to take away my retirement benefits. And with Missy, I was on the CBS News show with Nora O'Donnell, and a former victim advocate of mine found out about it through Adam Dorito, and told the Academy, and that's when they published a very false IG report about me in the Colorado Gazette, Colorado Springs Gazette. I did not see the report. They gave it to the Gazette before I even read it, and the rest is history. Went on CBS, did not cancel. We went ahead with it. And so the Academy's plan to stop that interview with CBS did not work. And here I am today, retired.
So how does everybody sort of know everybody?
I mean, I know Mel obviously because she was in my squadron, and it's kind of hard not to know people in your squadron. I was an upperclassman when she came in, so there's about a year difference between us. I obviously know Enos through OSI and Operation Gridiron, and all the cases that involves. And then I know Miss Beasley for obvious reasons. With any case that was involving sexual assault, obviously Miss Beasley was going to be a part of that. I actually asked Miss Beasley to be a character reference for me and write a letter for me as I was kind of going through the discharge process and so forth. So I guess for me at least, it's OSI and just being in the same squadron. And the investigations with sexual assault is how I kind of know everyone.
So like Eric said, you know, I've worked with him extensively for probably almost 2 years on a daily basis. I don't think Melissa, I don't think I've ever actually met you, but I know a couple other people that did your interview and things like that. So we must not have actually crossed paths. But and then obviously Miss Teresa Beasley and I worked extremely close, and with all the different cases that were going on. So I got to know her pretty well over those 4 years. So
I know Eric through exactly how he said he was involved with, well, he was a proactive bystander. That's what he was. And he was doing everything right, everything that we taught the cadets to do, to speak up and call out something that's wrong. He did that. And when he asked me to write a letter for him, it was one of the easiest letters I've ever written, because he is a fine young man, has great character. I did get in a little bit of trouble for doing that, but it was the right thing to do, to write that letter. So Missy, I know her from our work together. I wasn't her victim advocate, but I knew her because she'd be in the office meeting with her victim advocate, and I try to get to know everyone that we're serving, and that's how I met Missy. And Brandon, the finest OSI agent I've ever worked with. When he was going through the mess with OSI when he was leaving the Air Force, I couldn't believe it, because he was the finest OSI agent I've ever worked with. The victims had immediate trust with him, and that's very rare for an OSI agent. But Brandon was just a joy to work with. He was my go-to person. If I had a question or if I needed to know the truth, he would be the one that would be always straight with me.
As Eric said, we were in the same squadron. We're in Squad 34, but at the time I was a freshman and he was an upperclassman. So the way that academy culture is, we're not allowed to get to know each other very well. But he was just like a friendly upperclassman, which is kind of nice, because I was going through a hard time at that time. Brandon, I've never met you, but I have heard your name through Eric on a number of times. And then Teresa, she when I first made my report restricted, that's when I started to meet her, because she came into the PPC, and she was like a huge source of like guidance and like support for me throughout that entire time. Going into like the office where her and my victim advocate was like a little safe haven that I could retreat to occasionally, and they're one of my only sources of support at the academy. But it was very frustrating because there were a lot of limitations in what they could do. I felt like the academy kind of did that purposely, and I'm very grateful to have had her throughout that time, and even like know her up until this day. I just wish things had been better there, and the academy was just better with their sexual assault culture.
Wish we could have done more for you, Mel.
I didn't realize while I was there that what happened to me was something that was so common, and that a lot of the things that I went through and what I felt, and it was like I was walking the same path that so many other people had walked before. And when I would meet other women at the academy, and men as well, but after that stuff had happened, I would notice just like some people just like looked different, like they just seemed really sad or had a different look in their eyes, and I could just kind of tell. Nick, are you still with us?
He just made me the host, so I'm assuming
Okay.
he'll chime back in, but keep going.
It just kind of felt like it was kind of like reading a script, basically, because every single time I would go through some sort of negative interaction there, I'm like, well, I know someone down the hallway just dealt with that. Or like a few weeks after my sexual assault, I remember I heard like all this stuff happening in the alcove with Claxton, and that was something that you were involved in. So all of our stories are very intertwined, but I know there are easily like dozens, maybe even like 100 other people that may have similar experiences there that are very intertwined with sexual assault during that time.
Yeah, I think, it'd be interesting, like, if you took all the cadets and put them in, say one of the big rooms or what have you, and you said something along the lines of, raise your hand if you have either been assaulted or know someone that has been assaulted. I wouldn't be surprised if more than 75% of the cadet wing raised their hand at some point in time, just because it doesn't take OSI, or I guess OSI tradecraft, to figure out or to know something about someone that could be pretty life altering. Yeah.
And the thing that I don't understand is everyone in this meeting that was at USAFA did the right thing. And we were doing our job the way it was supposed to be done. And that worked at every other base I've been around, except for the Air Force Academy. I was told that when I went there, it was like a war zone. I was told it was really different. And I didn't know how true that was until I got there. You know, they think that they have their own set of rules. When I got there, they'd never had one wing inspection, never. And that's something that is it every 2 years. They had never had a wing inspection, and every base has those, I think, every other year. Is that right, Brandon? The wing inspections?
I think it is every 2 or 3 years. I think you're right. Yep. But
they'd never had one. And if you would question them doing things differently, the response I got from most people was, well, that's how we do it here at USAFA.
Yeah, it's for better or worse, I don't think you can really articulate how to set an expectation for the academy. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. And I guess to be clear too, and I say this often, but it's just, I think it's important in public forums. Like I personally don't have some vendetta against the academy to try to create a scandal or give them a black eye or what have you. And I know I say this often, but I refrain from talking in a manner that's inflammatory or rhetorical, and try to be as consistent as possible and factual as possible. And so with that, I think that the culture at the academy in general tries to do the right thing, but where it fails is that it doesn't acknowledge when the mark isn't being met, or when the standards are compromised, depending on who it's being applied to. That's where I think a lot of the problems begin to seep in. And this resistance to do what's right versus do what looks right seems to be, in my opinion, the biggest challenge for the academy, and that prevents it from actually having a big cultural change at the end of the day, to help people like Mel. Because at the end of the day, I mean, as we sit here and speak, there are people with a story like Mel's that may not even get heard or find justice or anything throughout their entire Air Force career, let alone academy career.
I think one thing about the Air Force Academy is a service academy, and it's not just the Air Force Academy, but I would say it's probably the same in Annapolis and also the same at West Point, is to preserve that image. And I think they have this, they want this perception by the public and by everyone else that they're perfect, that they don't have problems, that sexual assault program to them is a blight. I mean, they can't believe that. I still think they can't believe it happens with our cadets of honor and our staff of honor. And it's just this perception that they want to portray, that we're perfect, we don't have any problems, and everything's a legacy. It's just, I don't even know how to I don't know if you've seen the movie The General's Daughter. Has anyone seen that? No. And the line where her dad was a superintendent and she had been sexually assaulted, gang raped. And he said to her when she was in the hospital recovering, Basically, we're not going to talk about this because we don't want to harm West Point's image or tarnish its image. That was the basic thing. And that's what I'm trying to say. They have to preserve that legacy.
Do you guys really think that that's all it is? It's just a matter of preserving the image? Because that just seems kind of crazy to me, that, you know, all this effort is being put forth just to create the academy as, you know, super image. I mean, that just seems, because I'm not in the academy, I never have been. It's kind of odd in that sense.
Well, I would say image is everything because perception is power. So even our very first day of basic training, when you're sitting on that bus and they're screaming at you, they are still building you up in a way. I still remember being on that bus and they're like, this is the premier institution, like the nation's best and brightest are sitting on this bus. So from that day, it is a great aspiration to have all these like amazing kids from all over the country or even other
Sorry, you cut out there a little bit, Melissa.
Pardon me?
I think you cut out there a little bit.
What part?
All
of it.
On the bus.
Okay. Well, on the bus, they're just very, even from day one, the image is very important, and they almost say like your value is very tied to your image there. So I recognize at the academy, like, even though for the higher ups, that is a huge thing for them to maintain that image, because I'm sure they answer to other people within the Air Force, but same for the cadets. Like when I went unrestricted with my report, for instance, I think like they start targeting sexual assault victims because we make other cadets look bad, because now people are turning their heads and like, really, like, you guys do this at the Air Force Academy? So that's why they start attacking victims, because victims are the ones who are attacking the image. So not everybody, but overall, most people there are trained to respect the image and uphold it.
If in the what Missy has kind of touched on is, if you were, it depends on who assaulted you. And I know that's going to sound bad, but 80% of the assaults are perpetrated by cadets on cadets. And a great deal of them are intercollegiate athletes. A great deal of them are upper class or are in positions of power within the cadet wing, such as an honor officer, and they hold other cadets accountable. And that power differential at the academy is huge because it's a class system, and freshmen have no rights. They're at everyone's whim, but it's built in there. It's a perfect storm for sexual assault, because you've got that class system. You've got people that can get other cadets in trouble by what they know. And it's just made for sexual assault, unlike the operational Air Force is.
Why is it made for sexual assault?
You have a power differential. You have, say, a freshman, and say a senior is interested in them. And Missy mentioned it. You don't really deal with your upper class when you're a freshman. Freshmen are considered off limits to upper class. They can't date them. They really can't. Is fraternization a right word, Eric and Missy?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
You can't fraternize with them. So if a freshman is involved with an upper class, the freshman is afraid they're going to get kicked out, not the upper class. That's what they believe. The freshmen are there thinking every day, what's going to happen to me today that I'm going to get kicked out of here? And there's a million ways cadets can get into trouble. And upper class hold the underclass accountable. So they use that power, or let's say you're the honor rep in your squadron, which is another way to get a cadet disenrolled if they violate the honor system. Am I saying that right, Missy and Eric?
Yep, you're on point.
Okay. If you're an honor rep, you're an upper class, and they assign cases to you And I have had probably 40% of the sexual assaults I knew over 10 years were done by someone in that kind of position. Comments like, oh, I'm so glad you got an honor violation because now I can date you, or now I can spend time with you. So that's kind of built into the system there, that it would be very easy to get a freshman or an underclass or someone in trouble. And I think the young man we were speaking about earlier was in a lot of trouble. So that made him vulnerable to being assaulted. So cadets are in trouble, or they're underclass. They're very vulnerable to being assaulted because people can use that power to compel them to do things. Another problem is underage drinking, or just drinking. You would think it would be higher, but about 60% of the assaults there are alcohol related. And a lot of cadets there aren't old enough to drink. So do the math, you know, you've got regular college shenanigans going on, of course, going places where you're not supposed to, being with people you're not supposed to be with, and drinking when you're not supposed to be. And that is used to force others to do what you want them to do.
Yeah, and it going back to the image of the academy, you know, one of the things that I guess made Operation Gridiron and so forth so successful was mostly, and I think, you know, so you let me know if I'm off the point here. I think what made it more successful than anything else that was done was because there wasn't this idea of let's try to be seen, or let's try to I don't want to say scandal, but let's fact find here, and then if there's facts that support an accusation or an allegation, well, then there's actually going to be a level of accountability held, no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, no matter if you're an upperclassman or if you're an athlete. At the end of the day, you're going to be held to account. What I did, it wasn't even supposed to be known. It wasn't supposed to be out in the public. It wasn't even supposed to be very visible or anything like that. And what's frustrating is that even to this day, trying to find the opportunity to talk about your story or about what happened, there's the resistance of the Air Force to do so. Before I was discharged, I tried to talk about the totality of my case, and I couldn't. I tried to get every person that was involved to talk about the totality of my case, and I couldn't. To this day, even despite requests from senators and congresspeople and so forth to have a sit-down conversation, the Air Force still refuses to sit down and have a discussion, which is, I guess, a telltale to the point that I was trying to make earlier, is that for whatever reason, there's just this resistance to even have a conversation about certain things, to have a conversation in which you can provide, not just say facts, but hey, you know, here's what is real, the academy is really like on the ground. It doesn't seem like that really gets up to the chain. It doesn't seem like they really care unless there's media involved.
Why do you guys think it keeps getting swept under the rug?
It's just that people can't believe it happens there, because I'm not sure if it was Eric or Missy who said, you're told from day one, you're in the top 1% of the nation, you're the best of the best, the finest of the fine, the smartest of the smart, and therefore you're perfect. And you know, there are also college kids who are normal college kids that sometimes make mistakes or make bad decisions, but many times at the academy, it's a one mistake learning curve. It depends on what your mistake is. And if it has anything like, if it's sexual assault or underage drinking, they don't want to talk about it. There's also another unspoken code that cadets don't rat each other out, and you're not supposed to it's tell on each other or get a fellow brother or sister at arms in trouble. So there's not one reason that the academy is such a hotbed for sexual assault. There's multiple reasons.
Just to add to that, I would say that it's not that people can't believe that it happens there, it's that they don't want to believe that it happens there. In my case and many other cases, I think a lot of people were way more willing to accept the side of the story that maybe that girl, she made up that it's a false accusation. That's a lot more palatable than one of their own is sexually assaulting female cadets. Like, they would rather believe that someone's lying than someone actually doing something much more worse.
And that's true everywhere for people who report, for victims, survivors. It's rampant everywhere that most people make up their sexual assault. I mean, I don't know how you convince people that they don't. I've shown FBI statistics. I've shown my own experience of 30 years with only 2 false reports out of thousands. And it's just unbelievable that, like Missy said, they don't want to believe it. Even when you tell them facts.
I think kind of, and I've said this before, if you kind of get rid of all the, I don't know, I think someone called it the sex appeal of OSI, right? Where it's like this smoke and dagger type of persona. When you kind of strip all that away, at the core of Operation Gridiron, at the core of anything at least I was involved with, it was just doing what you think or you'd assume every cadet would do or every airman would do, right? And it's basically, it's not snitching, it's not going out and trying to lie on someone. It's just saying, hey, look, I'm here for my fellow airmen, man or woman. If something happened, I'm going to tell the truth about it, right? And I don't care who it is. I don't care who's involved. If something happened to someone, I'm going to tell the truth about it. If you had that type of perspective, if every cadet or every airman in every branch was doing just that one thing, you wouldn't need CIs. You wouldn't need so many policies to be implemented for victims, because victims would naturally in the culture have the support that they need, right? You wouldn't need all of this millions and millions of dollars going into research because, hey, look, you're going to have people who come hell or high water, they're going to do the right thing. They're not going to doubt or victimize or re-victimize a victim for coming forward. So it's when we kind of like strip all of that away, all we're looking at is, are you doing the right thing as both a bystander? Are you doing the right thing in terms of telling the truth, right? And I know that's pretty cliche, and it's like, yeah, if everyone did that, of course the world would be a better place. Yeah, sure. But I mean, that's where Operation Gridiron really stemmed from. I mean, there really is no kind of secret ingredient. That's how there was 3 convictions. That's how there was higher reporting rates coming down the pipeline when all of that was going down. It was just, that's the key. It was just simply telling the truth behind it.
The one thing that is an aside, and Eric, you're an anomaly. You were a bystander as a confidential informant, but you were also a bystander, but you didn't do anything wrong. You weren't underage drinking. You didn't have what the academy calls collateral misconduct. That means that as a witness of something, you can get kicked out of the academy too for coming forward as a witness, unless you are pristine, clean, and have never done anything wrong, which is impossible. But even in Eric's case, which he didn't, they will make up stuff. I mean, they will focus on wrongdoing or find wrongdoing somewhere. It's like people don't want to come forward as bystanders because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble and get kicked out too.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I feel like, I don't know, it feels in a way, I don't want to say we mitigate it, but look, we're talking about raping someone in some cases, right? We're talking about what the Romans used to use the tactic of war, right? I have 2 younger sisters that wanted to go to the academy at the time, right? And one of the things that kind of played in my head was, my God, if anything happened to my sisters, I would flip out, right? And I would hope someone is doing the right thing somewhere. And I think we kind of minimize it. And I don't know if we minimize the gravity of what we're talking about because we're desensitized, or because you have to experience, or it has to be in your face. But it's something, at least, that I'm not a victim of sexual assault, but I've seen what it does, and it kills something inside of someone, right? In many cases, it doesn't seem to fully heal up all the time. And so there's almost like an emptiness that's there, right? And if you kind of look at it from that perspective, where there is a harm being done, in some cases that's irreversible, why would we not do everything we can to help prevent it? At the very least, help fight against it. And so, isn't that what we're supposed to do in uniform? I mean, isn't that like the smallest of standards?
Airman's Creed. It's in the Airman's Creed.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't seem, if we're going to be trained to defend the country, but we can't defend ourselves or our own teammates, we have no business trying to virtue signal like we're doing the right thing. We can't take care of home.
I think that sexual assault, people, like Missy said, they don't want to believe it. They can't believe it. So the way they dismiss it is they deny it, or they don't acknowledge it at all, or they blame the victim. The victim's lying or making it up, or it's not really that bad. I've had commanders and air officers commanding say to me, "Well, she was just touched. That isn't that bad, is it?" And we have some young people there that have made chastity vows and have never even kissed anybody. Now, for them, a touch would be horrifying. I mean, they've never been touched sexually before, but it's minimized. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I shouldn't be so graphic, but it's minimized, it's denied, it's not talked about, it's not acknowledged. And in what I've seen is if there's too many reports, they'll actually remove them.
And Nick, you brought up a point where I think, the question you asked was, why does it keep being brushed under the rug? I'll tell you kind of like, well, here, the pattern goes like this, right? Something happens, it comes out in the media, the Air Force or whomever will respond with, we're going to do an investigation. They do an investigation, the public says, good job. And then you wait a few more months or a year, and then another scandal comes up and you just wash and repeat, right? And so it's just kind of like this cycle where it's not so much, let's say, obvious. It's not very obvious that it's brushed under the rug, because any Air Force leader is going to come out and say, no, we take all matters serious. And that's why we initiate these type of investigations and so forth. But at the end of the day, you got to, you sit back and you say, okay, but then why does it keep happening? Obviously, the investigations, which 99.9% of them always turn up with nothing on the wrongdoing as part of leadership. Obviously, that's not working anymore, right? And so it's not so much brushed under the rug as much as it's just stonewalled, right? It's, hey, here's an investigation, and then once the public loses interest, that's about it. I don't think that anything will change unless it's the public that is asking the questions, because if it's coming from anywhere else, nothing seems to happen.
Hey, you've been pretty quiet over there.
So kind of, I guess to sum up what some of the other guys have already talked about, but they have an honor code, right? We will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate among us any that do. And I got to tell you, the entire time I've been in OSI, and I'm going to venture out and say the entire time really OSI has existed at the Air Force Academy, we've never had a cadet come down to our office and say, I committed a crime and I'm here to turn myself in because the honor code compelled me to do so. And the Air Force Academy the leadership there likes to think that we have an honor code. We're going to fall back on that. It seems to be working. And truth be told, everybody, including during Operation Gridiron, when we had over, and Eric Thomas was actually a part of that, the 50, I think they called it the 50 roundup is what it ended up being called. And we rounded up almost 50 different people to ask them various questions, all these cadets. And I think a majority of these people lied to us. And nobody ever had a hearing such as Eric Thomas kind of went through something similar, where we're going to put you in front of a panel of cadets and talk to you about why you lied or violated the honor code. From my experience, there seems to be a different justice system at the Air Force Academy, one where your collegiate athletes, more specifically the football team, can get away with a lot of things. And then you have all these policies, the zero tolerance policy, all the policies that we've kind of discussed, the honor code and all that kind of stuff, that applies to all the regular cadets. And then you have, a collegiate athlete system. And lastly, I think the big thing that really why this is happening is because nobody wants to have a institution that is known for producing sexual assault, either victims or perpetrators. And when you're producing the numbers that Miss Beasley was talking about, that really looks bad. And they're going to start looking at that and saying, are you an academy? Like, what is going on, right? This prestigious institute. And just to tell you about how prestigious they think it is, when cadets actually graduate the Air Force Academy, they literally say, you are the best officers the Air Force will ever see. And I was there when they actually mentioned, they're like, there's a couple that might come from ROTC and prior enlisted, like basically everybody else is hot garbage. But the Air Force Academy is what produces the best, right? There really is, they put the Air Force Academy on a pedestal, so to speak. So you don't want to really tarnish that image. And then lastly, I think the biggest thing is that none of the leadership wanted to take accountability for ultimately what is failure. Either leadership making bad decisions, bad calls, bad judgment, whatever it may be. Nobody wants to admit to that. That makes yourself look bad as a leader. And I think we had a big chain of all these people thinking, oh, wow, I made a mistake. How do I cover that up so it doesn't look like I made a bad mistake? So either I can be promoted or I can protect my legacy or image, whatever it may be, depending on what, your rank or how far into the Air Force Academy or your service is. So I think that's the big thing is nobody wants to admit the failures that they had along the way.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird ethos where you would have people keep presenting this idea of perfection as opposed to, just saying like, hey, we made a mistake and we're gonna just rectify it and move on from there. I don't know. I think that this sort of detracts a little bit from what we were talking about, but morally, that seems like, a firmer foundation, stronger position to go from, because, we're people, we make mistakes. And to what you guys were talking about as far as the academy, I mean, I went to public school. I mean, it was kind of like a prison. You're in this place, you got a bell, you ring from here, and you're stuck with, men and women or boys and girls, whatever. But I go back to thinking something that like Jordan Peterson said, that like, you know, we've come a long way as far as, you know, cultural progress and society, but our ability for men and women to work with each other, we haven't made that much progress as far as working together. And I think the academy probably doesn't know how to address that, because from my understanding, women's introduction into the academy stems around 1970 or 1980-ish or something like that.
It was 19,
Culturally,
the last,
how to do it yet.
they have a term for that. When the women came, they have LCWB. Have any of you heard that term?
Last class without balls, or is that what it is?
With balls.
With balls.
What?
And that was the last class where the women were there. And I found out about these folks at a football game. I was walking around with my husband, and there were these guys walking around with tennis balls safety pinned under their jackets. And I said, what the heck is that? Some weird club. And my husband said, no, that's LCWB. And they used to throw the tennis balls on the football field at halftime or something. I don't know, but there's a legacy. A lot of, when I first got there in 08, we did, cadets are surveyed to death. One survey said that 80% of the males there didn't think women belonged there. And that was in 07, 08. So it's a misogynist culture, is what I'm saying. And it's perpetuated by grads hiring grads. They tend to come back as staff, and they perpetuate those LCWB or women don't belong here, or you know, this is how we've always done it. So one of the first questions I was asked there was, are you a grad? And I said, no. Do you have a PhD? No. Were you ever active duty? No. And they didn't go any further because I had none of those things. So they perpetuate, they bring grads in to teach and to run the athletic program and to run everything. So that's another way that myth is perpetuated.
You know, there's like this, kind of going to what Enos was saying earlier, you know, there's, and I'll just ask a question, like, Mel, have you, since you came public with your story, have you talked to any Air Force official in terms of, say you're sitting with the Air Force leadership to explain your story, what happened, how to do better going forward?
Have I spoken with any Air Force official?
Right.
I mean, I don't really have the resources, I feel like, to do that, but I'm not sure if I would, because my experiences with Air Force of like higher ups or my AOC or AMTA, my squadron, or on my last day, the commandant himself, was they all have very canned responses. I can't really have I can sit face to face with these people, but I can never actually have a conversation with any of them. Even my own therapist at the PPC, he was like on board with all of their mindsets and just had canned responses for me. So it's never really been a thought of mine to find any type of explanation from them, because they all are still a part of this culture. And yeah, I don't really think that is something I could ever get.
Yeah. And I don't know if Miss Beasley has had a sit down or talk with anyone since the CBS story, but the overall point that I'm trying to make is neither have I. I don't really think Enos has either, and it kind of goes back to that idea. Okay, where can we start with some type of change? Well, probably would start with a conversation with actual Air Force officials it's a real conversation, not something that is fought out in the public domain, right? One of the things since day one, I know for me, that I've asked is to have a conversation. Superintendent, chief of staff, somebody, can someone give me 20 or 30 minutes to at least listen to my story? Other victims that I know of that have gone public, some of them have requested, most of them haven't, but everyone has been turned away. So it's kind of like, you know, a good measurement of the seriousness or what is being taken serious Well, Air Force leadership doesn't even talk to you or have a conversation with you, even after, say, you come public. So if you can't get a conversation coming out on CBS or the New York Times or ABC or ESPN, if they're not going to have a serious conversation with you then what makes the freshmen at the academy think they're going to be taken serious when they come forward with their story, right? And that's the problem. That's the trend, is that even if the entire nation sees your story, and even if no one sees your story, the result is the same. No one is going to listen to what you have to say. And that is one thing from my experience I can say I share with some of the victims, is a loss of your voice. I didn't know that. I didn't know what that is or what that felt like until I tried to help and got the boot for it. And now no one hears my voice, right? So I can only imagine what it must be like to be voiceless and to be assaulted. Yeah, so you want to start somewhere. And I don't mean start with listening in the commercial sense. I mean, honestly, go out. If the Air Force would go out and find the people that victims or victim advocates have said that I've been wronged, if they go out and actually try to talk to them, not send a program or a board to talk to them, but actually revisit their case and what they're talking about, I think that's a good place to start. I think that if a freshman could feel like they could go to the superintendent at the academy and sit down and tell their story, that's a pretty good place to start, right? I think that if there was accountability in terms of actual, say, convictions with cases that have the facts to support it, I think that's a good place to start. I think that despite if you were an athlete or not, if you were a colonel or not, regardless of rank, regardless of stature, people saw that accountability and that justice come through. That's a great place to start. Everything else is just talk. It's not going to solve anything.
I agree. I mean, being sexually assaulted is one of the worst things that could ever happen to you. But going back to a school that you live at and you're in close quarters with everybody and just getting re-victimized every day, where you do try to get help, you try to reach out to your classmates, but then you start getting ostracized. You start trying to get help from the Peak Performance Center for like therapy help. The same people who run that are kind of questioning like your story. Or I had one therapist who told me, he's like, honestly, I'm a guy, I don't really understand what you went through. And I'm like, what kind of therapist is this? Weird. And I go to the chaplain and it's not helpful. I walk around campus, people call me names, people break my name tag on my door, they go through my room. It's just like every single day just having to deal with this stuff. And the people that I was taught to respect the most were Air Force officers. I really looked up to them and I wanted to be one someday. So me reaching out to the officer that overlooked my squadron or officers higher up and just being gaslighted by them constantly, it was just very re-victimizing. And eventually you're just like, I might as well just not talk about it anymore, because it's just a very like hopeless feeling, especially when you're watching other people in your squadron or other people you've met in your classes go through the same thing. And it's a very helpless feeling when you have to live in this environment and you're immersed within these people all the time.
Yeah, and I think people don't get it. Like, you know, if you're a victim, I'll make it practical, right? If you're assaulted, whether you report it or not, you're going to see the person who assaulted you, and whether there's an investigation or not, you're going to share daily life, whether it be eating meals with them, going to class with them. If you got in trouble, you're going to serve punishment with them. If you're an athlete, you're probably going to travel or go to practice on the same bus with them, right? So there is no separation really from the person who assaulted you, even throughout during an investigation. Oftentimes there's still not a separation. And so put yourself, you know, for the average person, I guess, that, you know, that watches this or listens, Put yourself in the shoes of a cadet who, by definition, lives with the person that assaulted them, right? And then try to find the courage to come forward, only so that everyone, once you do come forward, leaves your side, for either fear of getting in trouble, or because they just don't believe you, or because of the person that assaulted you is too big in name, right? That gives you just a glimpse of the environment that's going on at USAFA land, or at the academy. And so what Melissa's describing is something that goes to what we first started with. You can't necessarily articulate it, right? You're literally, so many words, you sleep with the enemy, right? You are literally in the same breathing space as them constantly. So that's the environment, that's the culture, that's what this is all about.
The other to extend that, it's not, if you've been assaulted, that is not a good environment to recover. The pace there is so fast. And how many credits do you guys have to graduate with? 150 semester hours?
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And you just, if you're less than with it, if you're sad or depressed about being assaulted, which you will be, and you're angry, which you will be, and all the, you're not sleeping in that because you're having nightmares. And it's not, you have to be 100% to survive there, I guess is what I'm saying. But if you've been hurt or harmed, it's not a good place to be. You can't just stop classes unless you take a turn back and go away for up to a year. That's really the only way you can. Then you're behind your class by a year. So
I tried to do that and they denied it, and they didn't give me a reason why. But I know other cadets there who requested like the admin leave that you can do for a semester for a year, and they were granted it, but for me they wouldn't. And that would have given me the break to recover and probably go to therapy and get the help that I needed, be within my support system again, to potentially come back strong and be able to finish and provide a little bit of separation from the people who are constantly like causing me like ongoing trauma. But I think they kind of knew that I needed that, and they were already trying to railroad me out at the time, so they didn't grant it for me.
And there's no rhyme or reason why they didn't. I mean, they would never like sit down with you and say, we don't think this is a good place for you, or even give you the chance to have that administrative turn back. They don't treat victims with compassion. I think basically if they would just believe victims, that would be a big start, just to believe them, instead of constantly calling them liars or they're making this up. I've heard from cadets, well, they only reported a sexual assault because they were failing algebra, to get out of trouble. Or they reported the sexual assault because they were underage drinking and they didn't want to get caught for that. So they're just not believed. And I don't even know how to tell people you need to believe victims, but that would be a good start for me, believing.
I feel like this environment is so toxic that when someone does come forward, that has they have every reason to be telling the truth, because they've pretty much just shut down every aspect of their life. They've lost all their friends now. They're being victimized by their commander. Their teachers are looking at them differently. For you to come forward and do that, you're basically sabotaging your own career. So why would you do that? There's no reason for that. You're really something really motivated you because a serious wrong was done to you.
So if let's say a sexual assault occurs, are you kind of scarlet lettered after that? Is it do people know pretty does word travel fast?
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody's
it's a really
aware.
small school, and they have this list. It's called the Cadet at-risk list. And when I was told about this list is supposed to provide extra resources for you. It's so that all of the leadership within the academy, they see your name on that list, and if you need help in some capacity, they should be aware of it. And they have occasional meetings where they discuss like the status of all these cadets. But I think when you put cadets on a radar for the cadet at-risk list because they came forward as a sexual assault victim, the academy starts looking at them differently. I remember when they were trying to kick me out for things that weren't even true, that they started digging through like all my files and just trying to find something to pin me on without evidence. I went to my lawyer on base and he's like, just to speak with you honestly, Melissa, they're just trying to find anything to kick you out right now because they do not want you here. So it really just, it is truly like a scarlet letter.
You know, to follow up on that, it's kind of interesting. So the Air Force Academy was my first assignment as OSI, and it's pretty much standard procedure for us anytime we have a subject of an investigation to go get their cadet file. And we'll look through that and we'll see if anything is kind of glaring in there. Did they have any discipline problems? Were they, you know, already a problem, whatever it may be. But that's just kind of standard documentation for us. And the first person that I ran that was pretty high profile, well, later it would become very high profile, was Cadet Stefan Claxton. And I went down and he was in Eric Thomas's squadron at the time. And I went to go get his cadet file from his AOC. And at the time, Major Granistowski. And Granistowski actually gave me Eric Thomas and Reggie Hargrove's cadet file. And I said, why are you giving me these? They're not under investigation. I don't even know who these guys are. And he was like, trust me, you're going to want to look through these. And I was like, I don't think you understand what we do as OSI. Like, I don't, before I met Eric Thomas, I was like, I don't care about the guy. You know, I was like, I don't know why you're giving me this file. And I went ahead and took it because he kept just shoving it in my hands, and I was like, whatever. But exactly like you said, like there's a culture where, you know, we just want to get rid of certain people for some reason. And this is also kind of interesting, kind of to share a little bit more about the culture that both, you know, Eric Thomas and Melissa talked about, is that somebody later on, I didn't realize it at the time, but somebody later on asked me, how did the academy feel about these convictions? We got, and I say Eric Thomas was instrumental in this, and I don't know if we could have done it without him. We got 3 sexual assault convictions. We were 100%. And for reference, there is a less than a 1% chance that a conviction or that those type of cases will end up in a conviction. So we had a lot of people wondering how we did this. And somebody later asked me, how did the Air Force Academy react? And I said, you know, nobody ever really cared. You know, we got the first conviction since 1997. And then we got 2 more after that. I can't tell you how many people I've gotten promoted off of that, especially in the legal department. But and Teresa can kind of attest to this as well. We had a system where SARC and OSI, when I first got to the academy, that relationship was non-existent. There was, you know, really headbutts. There was a lot of animosity between the 2 departments. And when we all work together, when I say we, I'm talking OSI, SARC, and the legal team. When we work together, we were able to get something that supposedly the Air Force Academy has been trying to get for a long time. How do we increase the reporting? How do we get convictions? And we have the key. We found out how to do it. And when that happened, they have not gotten a conviction since I have left. And I'm not saying this is all my doing by any means, but I'm just saying they have not gotten a conviction in court. And we have the key. We know exactly how to do it, but they have dismantled. When I say they, the Air Force Academy leadership has dismantled every single step of that. They have gotten rid of the confidential informant program, which they're not even allowed to do. There's a lot of things that they have really kind of hindered on that to really for us to be successful. And then lastly, like everyone said, it's like they didn't care. that this was happening. They didn't care that the reports were through the roof. In fact, they were opposite. They were very upset that females at the academy finally
Why were
had.
they upset?
Well, they were upset at the number of reports. Now, I would have thought the opposite, because my whole entire career, they were always, I remember at one time getting an email. This is when I very first joined the Air Force. Is there anybody that has any idea on how to increase the reporting? And here we have it years and years later. I didn't know I was going to be the one that would, actually do this, but we have the ability to increase this reporting. I think Teresa can give you the exact numbers, but it was somewhere around 25 reports. That jumped after the 3 convictions to over 56 females reporting, one of the highest they'd ever seen at the academy. And they wanted nothing more than to get rid of that, to go back to let's keep a nice low number of reports. Let's not have these number of reports. It's almost like they didn't want to know. So it was all a facade to appease everybody. Look, we have all these programs, but we don't really want them to work.
And when they were working, when we implemented that dream team with Brandon, and we had some great providers at the Peak Performance Center for a while, and our office was on board, and we had the JAG. I mean, it was like a dream team, but I just lost my train of thought. I apologize, but they
You're good.
they dismantled it. And when I was never given an audience like everyone else to talk about why this was happening, why I was such a pariah, and why they wanted to get rid of me, as Misty said, because they wanted to get rid of me too, because we were having success. And they told me that the JAG I talked to was that I talked victims into being victims. That they really weren't victims of sexual assault, but the SARC talked them into being a victim. And I don't even know what to say. I mean, it like Brandon said, we were trying to get people to come forward, and we created a climate where it was safe to come forward, where you were believed, and where OSI was on board, and Peak Performance at the time was on board. So we had a climate that believed victims, and that's why the reporting went up so high, because they knew they'd be listened to.
And Melissa made a comment earlier, and I'll be honest, she said, I can't really relate. I'm a male. And, I will be honest, I got into OSI, and I would have never in my wildest dreams thought I would have uncovered the things that I had uncovered. And I've never really, any other base I've ever been at, I haven't seen the prevalence of sexual assault, both when I was on regular active duty and even when I was first starting OSI at Little Rock. And what is very interesting is, I may not have known what that is like. I may not have known somebody personally at the time that has went through that. But it was really odd. A lot of OSI members or other parts of that investigation team, whenever a sexual assault came up, it was like, oh gosh, not another one. And it always made me sick to my stomach. And I don't know, Melissa, how your case went as far as OSI is concerned, but I had a lot of female cadets that were very disgusted at the way that other people kind of handled that. And I just, you go in, and I can kind of attest to what she said earlier. People go in with this preconceived notion that you are making it up. And it's almost like, why are you making it up? Are you failing your class? It's almost like we're starting to come up with these conclusions before you even tell your story. Did you fail your class? Are you having trouble? You're just trying to get out of something. And Teresa also mentioned earlier, almost 80% of these are these cases of sexual assault are cadet on cadet. And while some of these, may have alcohol involved or something like that, it doesn't negate the fact that you were sexually assaulted, in my opinion. And the reason why I think I had a lot more success, not only on sexual assault side, but even I'm sure Eric Thomas can kind of tell you on the confidential informant side, I treated people like they were a human. What a weird concept. And I trusted and I believed what victims said. What another weird concept, right? And I had a lot of success. I had a lot of females that were sexually assaulted that originally had a restricted report, but because I talked to them and because I was the one that was doing these investigations, they decided to go unrestricted. I even had one female, I won't mention her name, but I had one female that said, I will not talk to anybody else. And another OSI agent actually went in and talked to this individual. And she was like, I don't like that agent. I don't know what her problem is, but I'm not going to talk to her. I'm only going to talk to you. And I just thought, what are we doing? There's some kind of breakdown where it's clearly not just an academy thing. You know, like I said, it's on other sides where Melissa said it was at peak performance, you know, the therapist, it's OSI. I've seen it within my own department. What is the deal where we're, you know, ridiculing these people and coming up with our own solutions before they can even talk, you know?
And when I can say too, you know, Missy talked about the Peak Performance Center. After you left, Missy, their business plan, I've never heard of a business plan with a counseling center before, but they had a business plan that their job was to weed out cadets that don't belong there. And I thought their job was to help cadets stay there. And for a sexual assault victim, that's just devastating. Because
For me,
that's
this experience is, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
This is a very hit or miss experience when this happened. When luckily I lucked out having you, Teresa, but I wish Brandon worked on my case, because honestly, the day I went down to OSI, the few days I went were the worst days of my life. I'm not even exaggerating. Some of the most traumatic experiences I faced were from OSI interviewing me and just treating me terribly. And I feel like if all these pieces had been better placed and there was more consistency, if I had Teresa, if I had Brandon, if I had someone like Eric, like all these things, how it should be. And I don't think that is too high of an aspiration to have. I don't think things would have been so bad. Maybe there wouldn't have been a conviction, but at least I would have the resources I needed. And at least there would be people trying to help me versus just me trying to do this alone, or reaching out to people who actually just turned out to be enemies. So when I hear how you speak about this, Brandon, it kind of bums me out, because I wish you worked on my case. And sometimes when I talk to Eric, I'm like, man, you did a lot of great work. Wish you were involved with the community of, because I was assaulted by a different sports team. So I kind of wish he was in the in crowd with that, but I'm sure many other victims feel that way too.
I mean,
Well, and it's sad because, you know, you're not alone with that. I've had a couple cases where commanders were wanting me to read rights. As soon as a victim of sexual assault said I was drinking alcohol underage, which is most of the cadet population, they wanted me to stop and read the rights. And I'm like, I'm sorry, we investigate things that put you in jail for 1 year or longer. We investigate felony level crimes. Tell me where it says underage drinking is a felony crime. And that kind of upset me. And it's really, like you said, Melissa, it's really, really sad to hear. Our job as an investigator when it comes to victims of sexual assault is to listen first. And I think we go into this with an interrogation mindset. And I don't know why. Our job is really to listen and to collect the facts. And really that doesn't change from any case. You know, our job is to collect the facts and present that. And it just really, it's crazy to think, because I've had other victims of sexual assault, including the ones that went to court-martial and were convicted. I had one of them say that they really struggled. There is no closure for some of these victims of sexual assault. It's almost like they have to live with this their entire lives. And it's not a fun process, right? You're telling somebody very private details, and you're trying to open up. And when it becomes an interrogation setting, that's not a comfortable environment for you to open up in. And I just think that's we're doing a disservice to these people when we make it like that. And what really got to me after all this is I had one of the victims of sexual assault after the conviction come up to me, and she was like, I didn't know what to do. She's like, I never had any closure. I once contemplated suicide, for God's sakes. But you gave me that closure. Thank you for being so good throughout that process and listening. And that really struck me. I was like, wow. I was like, why are we not in any of these departments? Why are we not doing more? Basically, why are we not doing what we're supposed to do? You know?
Yeah, I think you hit a good point where you're talking about look at work. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your opinion, what bias you may or may not have. Numbers don't lie at the end of the day, right? And out of all the policies that have been thrown out since then, before then, red dot, green dot, this conference, this thing or whatever, this briefing, you know, it doesn't yield the same type of, I guess, in my opinion, I guess, opportunity for closure or peace and a sense of justice and a sense of standards and accountability, much like the program that was going on when we were there. And Mel, man, I wish we could have done more. Even if I knew it would have resulted in this disenrollment, I wish we could have done more.
And Mel, you didn't miss out. The Air Force missed out on you. They missed out on a great officer, and the same with Eric. These are the people you want leading. These are leaders. They do the right thing. They take care of their people, and you are taught that to take care of your people. Airman's creed: never leave an airman behind. I don't think we follow that at the academy too closely, but you guys, they missed out on you.
I think Teresa's right, because I mentioned the honor code before, and I know for a fact that General Johnson basically said the reason why we got rid of the confidential informant program, which she had really no authority to do so, but anyway, she said we have the honor code, right? Well, going back to it, you take a look at the one guy who decided to uphold that, which was Eric Thomas. He comes down and says, hey, something's messed up. This guy Claxton literally sexually assaulted somebody, which we got a conviction on because of him. Had he actually done the bro code that everybody calls at the academy and kept his mouth, this is what I guess pisses me off so much, is that had Eric Thomas not said anything and followed the bro code rather than the honor code, Eric Thomas would be in the military right now. He would be an officer. He'd probably be what, a captain, a major by now, for God's sakes. But because he did the right thing, he actually followed the honor code, he gets kicked out. And then all of these football players, like I talked about earlier, the 50 roundup that were lying to our face and they're trafficking drugs and sexually assaulting people. We have 3-star generals trying to keep them in the Air Force. And like Teresa said, why do we want those people in the Air Force? And this is a scary statistic, but, and Teresa can kind of hit more on it, but those 3 convictions that we got at the academy, Claxton, Daniels, and Cooks, those 3 individuals made up almost 75% of the reports in 1 year that we got. And those are the people, those are the sexual predators that you want in the Air Force?
Yeah, I mean, and
hold on. I got a question real quick. I was kind of interested because I heard, and maybe I got this wrong, he's just crazy to me if I'm right. But I think I heard that while Operation Gridiron was going on, the superintendent of the academy was requesting these documents he sent to his office, Michael Gould, which I don't know, it's supposed to be separate. But I had a question. I wrote it down. Might be a little weird, but because the sports team is a kind of like a boys club, do you think it keeps getting swept under the rug because people who are in that boys club, once they get out of the Air Force, you're going to be able to get like a good paying job. And I think a lot of things in life come down to like money. And I was looking at the nonprofit records from the time that Michael Gould sort of nonprofit being the Air Force Academy Foundation, which, you know, we can touch on this a little bit. Coach Calhoun is a part of. I think it's under a different denomination, Air Force Athletic something, but left, it was around 25 million was the net holdings. And 2019, I looked at it, the 2019 records show it's around 100 million. It's not a small number. So I don't know, I guess what I'm saying is, do you think the reason why it exists as a boys club is because, you know, what am I going to get out of it from telling the truth? I mean, I'm not going to be able to get like good pay or something like that. You know, I'd be better off just keeping my mouth shut.
So to kind of answer your question, Nick, this was kind of interesting. So you brought up a good point. When I was, some of the very first cases were non-football, non-athlete cases, right? Quite frankly, nobody cared. I never had General Gould asking for anything. I never had anybody. I would just give it to the AOC. I would give my case findings to them. They would make their decisions, and it was pretty quick and painless. Nobody ever cared. All of a sudden, we start looking into the Air Force Academy football team, and Gould wants every copy of every report, which I have never given him a report copy ever before. He's never needed one. He's not on the list of distributions. And it was very, very odd. And he started demanding cases be done at a certain time, which he's not allowed to do. And what was funny is,
he's a entity, just so the background, because he's an entity separate from OSI, he is, because you're a federal, right?
It's considered obstruction of justice. Yeah, he's not in our, it would be a conflict of interest, right? We're trying to run an investigation. We're unbiased. And in order not to basically taint that for, because we go to a court, right? We go in front of a judge and those kind of things. We can't have undue command influence because it taints the case, right? So that was one of the reasons. But I had Lieutenant General Gould call our office, and I answered the phone one time. It was the weirdest phone call I've ever had in my entire life. And he said, "What can I do to keep Asher Clark at the academy? Like I have any power whatsoever." And he had no idea. And this is the funny thing, and I don't mind talking about it now. I was a staff sergeant, but they masked our rank. And I'm like, you're a 3-star general, basically asking a staff sergeant if you can keep somebody in the Air Force. Like, you know, the other part of that, like you said,
I'm not familiar with the rankings too much. I know general's a big deal, I think.
Yeah, very
why
big
is
deal.
that significant?
Yeah, it's different.
Think of it this way. I was just, it's kind of, I guess, degrading to talk about since I am that guy, but think of me as like a janitor and him as a CEO. Okay. That'll give you a little better perspective on it. Okay.
All right.
But the other part of that was to talk, you mentioned Troy Calhoun. So this is kind of interesting. At the time, Penn State was going through all that sexual misconduct with the college, right? The society at that time said, we need to look at coaches and start holding them accountable. So our region commander of OSI said, I want you to talk to Troy Calhoun. And I had a pretty robust source network, confidential informants, and I had a guy that was on the equipment custodian part of that team, of the football team. And he told me that Troy Calhoun was telling people not to worry about it. It'll blow over. There were some very, very nasty allegations of he knew exactly who was doing drugs, so he would have other people. I didn't know you could pick the people to do your analysis test, but apparently Troy Calhoun can pick his third string players and they can do the drug test, and your starting first string can play the entire time. He basically was aware of all of these issues. And when we went to investigate that, General Gould at the time, who the superintendent, said, "Oh, don't worry about that. I'll take care of it. I'll talk to him." And again, I was like, I forgot that you had a badge and were allowed to do that. I was unaware that you were a federal agent and you were running this case, kind of thing. But we were told to stand down, let him do his thing. And he calls back, and I'm not kidding. When I called him, or when he told me about that, he called back within 5 minutes and said, "There's nothing to worry about." So, but I had credible information from sources that said that.
Hold on. Back it up. Wait. General Gould, or wait, can you repeat what you just said?
Yeah, so when General Gould found out that we wanted to interview Troy Calhoun, we wanted to know what he knew. We had a lot of football players that we were investigating. We wanted to know what he knew, what he was doing with that situation and everything like that. And when General Gould found out about that, he said, no, I'll interview Troy Calhoun. I'll ask him those questions.
Wait, General Gould said
he would take over, that part of the investigation out of the kindness of his heart. So yeah.
I heard, and that's weird because I had heard that they were buddies. So you're like
probably
asking your buddy.
Yeah. Did you do anything wrong? No. Wink, wink. All right, I'll let him know. Now, like I said, I had credible information from a confidential informant that was polygraphed that said Troy Calhoun did know. He was giving briefings. He was telling he was basically coaching the team on what to say, what to do, to lay low, all these kind of things. So it would have behooved, I would have loved to have interviewed him because I would have loved to see what information he had. And to this day, I still think somebody should probably raise the flag, just like they did with General Gould. General Gould was found on obstruction of justice. And I think the same thing should happen with Troy Calhoun, but apparently he's a really good football coach. I don't know, but yeah.
You guys remember that letter I sent you from Affairs?
Oh, yes.
Well, unless I'm mistaken, I'm pretty sure Michael Gould heads that nonprofit. They stated it, the PA letter said.
Yeah, he's the CEO now of the AOG, the Association of Graduates, and the Academy Foundation or whatever. So I guess they merged, and General Gould is now the CEO of pretty much the bank for the academy.
Yeah, he pays Gould's salary, or he pays Calhoun's salary, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, and kind of juxtapose what Enos is saying, because I think people that would watch this or listen to this, they're going to say, and even if, the academy might even release a response, and it's going to come somewhere along the lines of, well, we had an investigation that debunks everything that all of us are saying, right? Well, the problem with that is that, there is, if you look at the credibility or the facts of, say, what Enos is talking about with Gould, that is proven, right? It's in the IG report, right? They did find that Gould was an obstruction of justice, right? And they reasoned that, well, it didn't reach a threshold because basically the convictions in the court or the cases still went forth, right? And so in so many ways, they basically say, well, because OSI did such a good job and still got the convictions, and because this obstruction of justice didn't alter the outcome, well, then we'll just kind of let it slide, right? So that's kind of how this whole game is being played. It's like, oh, well, because there was still the convictions, because OSI was still able to do their case, well, no harm, no foul. Well, it's kind of a big deal because I can't remember ever of a three-star general having an IG report saying that they obstructed justice and it just be brushed under the rug like that, right? I can't think of a single case, a single scandal, no matter what service is there, where there was an actual IG report that came out and said, this three-star general who was the superintendent, impeded the investigation, right? And then you take that and you apply it to everyone, because Gould was there when Melissa was there. Gould was there when I was there. Gould was there when Miss Beasley was there. He's kind of, the single point head, and yet and still, no matter how much facts and credibility you have or you provide, nothing seems to happen. I think that's the biggest point, is that nothing seems to happen, even if they are found to be in the wrong, right? So it's not a matter of investigations or anything like that. It's a matter of who's going to do something about it and hold these people accountable, right? Why are Melissa's standards, why are my standards so much higher than the 3-star? Right? Why do we have to prove literally every word we say? We have to back up with documentation, transcripts, facts, anything that will substantiate what we're saying. But a 3-star general can go out here, literally lie in the public domain. He could say that I rolled out with rapists and that's why I was successful with Operation Gridiron. They can pretty much say anything at any point in time with no consistency, with no facts to support it, and get away with it. But heaven forbid Melissa say she was assaulted, or heaven forbid I say, hey, I'm not the worst cadet breathing, because we get hammered for it, right? My paperwork, my documentation is similar to those who've been convicted of an assault, right? I can't ever serve. I have an honorable discharge, yeah, but I can't serve in any capacity, right? Because of the rating the superintendent put on there. I can't do anything pretty much, right? But they have an obstruction of justice, and you can become a CEO of the AOG. I don't know how that works.
Well, and Eric, also to follow up on that, I remember Melissa's case. I not in detail, but I do remember that going on around the same time that I was talking to you, if I remember correctly. Somewhere very close in that time range.
Yeah, no, I think with Mel,
and
it's kind of crazy. I don't think had a conversation, especially with Mel on the other line about it. But I think that if either A, given more time, or B, given more flexibility, we probably could have done more than what was done, which is why I keep going back, Mel, to apologizing because of that, because I recall it pretty well that there was, I guess you could say, the beginning breadcrumbs to her case that we could have definitely.
There was a big piece to Mel's, and she knows this. It goes back to the helpers not helping but hurting, and Peak Performance Center with their plan of we're getting rid of cadets that don't belong here. They made that determination. Now they were licensed providers, but they're a college counseling center. They're not supposed to be diagnosing people or doing long-term therapy. They're there to help people kind of get through the academy and get through a sexual assault and get through any trauma they're having. But that's not what they did. They would actively look for ways to kick out sexual assault victims, to the point of going back to their MEPS paperwork to see how they answered questions if they were consistent. And I know several victims that answered the question. MEPS is when you first come into the Air Force, you're screened and they ask you a question, something like, have you ever been under mental health counseling, or have you ever been institutionalized or put in a program for mental health reasons? And, when you're a little kid, which a lot of these young women were, they said no, I haven't been. And the Peak Performance Center would go back and investigate and say, well, you lied about that because you were when you were 8 years old or you were 14 years old. And you're a liar and you broke the honor code and you don't belong here because you weren't honest. You lied on your MEPS paperwork. So they were finding ways to get rid of people, mostly sexual assault victims. Plus, they didn't believe victims. They thought most of them were making it up. And that brings me to the Special Victims Council, who they weren't there for Mel. They weren't there for Eric and Brandon. They didn't have them there when you were there. They're a specially selected attorney, a JAG, who is specially trained to work with sexual assault victims. And they can work with them with confidential or non-confidential reports, and they can advise the victim, which has never happened before. They're to give the victim a voice in the courtroom, and they're to advocate for that victim. And that is not what happened with that program. I had a couple of special victims counsels tell me that, in my experience, 95% of people who report sexual assault are lying. And I remember one JAG, I just looked at him and I said, "What the hell did you just say?" And he said, "No, they're lying. They're making it up." And I said, "Well, I've had the exact opposite experience. I've had 2 in 30-year career that have said they were and they weren't. That's not very high. And it's the FBI stats are 6%, no more than any other crime. But these JAGs, they didn't believe me. And that's who's representing the victim. That's who's going to these meetings with the superintendent, the commandant, and the commanders, and representing the victim and saying, should we go forward with the case?" Well, that's why a lot of cases don't go forward, because the Special Victims Council doesn't believe the victim either.
And that seems to be like a pattern, right? Like it's like a default mode, because even with my case, again, I'm not a victim, right? But I have been, and that's part of the fight that I have today, of lying or misconstruing facts, or in some cases they just disregard what I say and just act like I never said it. And so it seems to be kind of like this common denominator, whether you're a victim or not. If it's just something that goes against, I guess, the status quo, or even if it's not in the mainstream, right? It's going behind. You're having a deliberation behind closed doors. It's like you're just immediately not believed, no matter what you have, no matter the facts that you have, no matter who is speaking on your behalf or not. You're just not believed. And it's what's really odd about that is that, how do you break through that, right? Because if you're not going to believe a victim, or you're just not going to believe anyone, really, right? You're not going to believe, in my case, I'm not a victim, but I'm trying to articulate, hey, this is what I was doing, and I'm not a terrible cadet. No, we don't believe you, right? To have, the OSI squadron commander tell my case handler, Enos, not to speak on my behalf. He's going to go speak for my case, and then end up completely botching and saying things that weren't true. That's okay, right? To have documents and facts and say, hey, can you please look at this? You guys got it wrong. You're wrong. You're lying. But if the superintendent just says, oh, this is what I believe, or whatever, okay, we'll buy it. I don't get it. I don't get why Melissa is looked at as a liar, just as if a bystander was to speak for Melissa is looked at as a liar. I don't understand what that is, why we do that, and then expect to change the culture, right? How do you change the culture when you yourself aren't even buying into what the people are telling you?
Because
right?
that's how you get ahead, and that's how JAGs get promoted. After Brandon left, I don't know if you heard about the trail cases where we had 2 different cadet females assaulted while out running at 2:00 in the afternoon. And OSI told me this was not Brandon. An OSI agent in charge of these cases said to me, well, I think they were dates that went bad. I don't think they were assaulted. I think they were out there and they shouldn't have been out there with boys because they were freshmen, and it was a date that went bad. And both of them had concussions, by the way. Now, how you give yourself a concussion, well, I don't know. But if you've got OSI going in with the thought that this is not a real assault, if you've got Special Victims Council saying most victims lie 90%, and you've got the counseling center saying we're trying to get rid of people who lie, who's got more credibility? Those people do. The person that's been victimized, and Eric, you have been victimized too, as has Brandon, because doing the right thing is not popular there. Can you imagine if it would have gotten out about those 2 trail rapes, which it should have, because civilians can go up there and run too. People that aren't military, well, we'll just put it on the Academy Facebook account. How bad would that look if
Yeah, it would be terrible.
Yeah, I mean, so that's why they lie, because it's too horrible. We can't have that happening at the academy. I think that's really it. Bottom line.
Well, here's the part of it that I think sometimes goes undiscussed is that, look, for every second that we're wasting not believing a victim, right? The person that is doing the assaulting is going to assault more people, right? Statistically speaking, it's never a 1-to-1 ratio, right? It's not like here is a perpetrator and they only assaulted one person in their entire lives. It doesn't work that way, right?
They have a rating of between 6 and 200.
Right, exactly. So you have multiple victims for every one perpetrator, right? So the guy that assaulted Mel more than likely is assaulting other women, right? For every person that gets away with this, or for every second that leadership is spending whether or not to believe someone like Mel, well, the guy is going to go out and assault someone else. I mean, you could bet money on it. Right, as we spend time trying to figure out whether or not I or Enos are telling the truth, or if we have some hidden agenda. Hey, these guys are assaulting other people, and that's at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about, right? I mean, that's what it is. It's not like Claxton just assaulted just one person. No, there was several, and just because a conviction comes out, with 1 or 2 victims, it doesn't mean that there wasn't evidence to show that there were multiple victims, right? And that goes across the board. And this is a trend. So I don't think there is enough focus on the fact that out of, say, 50 restricted and unrestricted reports in that year, that doesn't mean there's 50 perpetrators. That just means that multiple perpetrators are assaulting multiple women and they're getting away with it. They're putting on rank. Right.
Another thing,
if you look at the cycle, they go from cadet to lieutenant. They make a career to the Air Force. They will be in charge of someone coming forward with their own assault case, right? And so that's who's going to be in leadership, right? The person who used to assault when they were a cadet is now the decision maker for another victim. That's what we're setting ourselves up. So if we're wondering why this wheel keeps revolving, and I've been asked the question, why do you want to still serve even after all this? Well, it's because if we're going to have a change, it has to start from the inside out, right? And so for me, at least, out of the hundreds of people that are in leadership that are going to have a certain opinion and lack of accountability, I hope to at least be someone that could listen to a victim and say, hey, look, I get exactly what you're talking about, and I'm here for you. And so I think that aside from just having problems with just believing, we are letting these perpetrators get away with it. I mean, at the end of the day, we are. There's no policy out there right now that's accounting for that.
Well,
right?
do you remember Cookie?
Yeah, very, very.
He was a football player who had multiple victims, and even after he was on cadet lists like Missy was talking about, and he was charged with sexual assaults, he was still doing it. He was still running around the academy doing it. Yeah. And when the reason I had a very brave cadet female come to my office and taped the conversation with him where he apologized for trying to assault her, and that got him sent to Teller County because he was a risk. But what happened with him was he was only in jail, 10 months or something, or served 4 months. And what happened to him after he left the academy and he left jail? He went on to Alcorn State because he still had Division I eligibility, and also tried out for the Green Bay Packers and the Washington Redskins.
Well, there's even more to Cook's case, right? Because he was also part of the whole Manitou Springs party, the roofies allegations. Cook's was, at least from my experience, one of the most egregious cases that were out there. By far. The cliche look, a lot of times, it's not always so apparent, but Cook's was very apparent. The aggression, the rate in which he was making the assault. Yeah. So, to have that kind of record and then go on to play at Alcorn State. Like nothing really ever happened.
And then go on to the pros.
Yeah, and then to go, you know, to different combine trouts and all this other stuff. Yeah, you know,
Where's the accountability? Where's the accountability?
Well, and he got to play the entire rest of the season. That's the thing.
Yeah.
While
Yeah.
he had an active case.
Yeah.
He had an active case and he was allowed to. In fact, we got asked, this is kind of a crazy thing. Both Troy Calhoun and General Gould asked if that was okay if Jameel Cooks continues to play football while he was under investigation. Not just under investigation, like Eric Thomas said, he was the worst offender that we had with 8 victims of sexual assault. And his string of behavior went back to when he was in high school.
Yeah.
And I went and actually, because it's here in Colorado Springs, I went and had to do an investigation on the things that he did while he was in high school.
And it was violent. It wasn't.
And he was still allowed to join the Air Force Academy. And I feel like, Melissa, I think you had something to say earlier. I don't know if you got to say.
Oh, I was just saying with the accountability thing, when we don't hold these people accountable, yes, it's increasing the amount of victims we have because they go on to assault more people. But the thing is, what kind of message is that when we're not holding people accountable? When other people are saying like, well, he still gets to play football, he still gets to stay, people still like him. So maybe if I'm in a sketchy situation, I can still assault someone. So yes, it creates more sexual assault victims, but this isn't an institution that we're creating more sexual assault like perpetrators as well, because they learn right then and there that it's okay to do it. Nothing bad happens.
Yeah.
Well, I had a quick question. Why did Michael Gould ask you if it was okay for Cookie to play football?
So here's kind of the crazy thing. Before I came in to the to OSI, before I got to the Air Force Academy, nobody ever, I don't think, investigated the football team. And I had a lot of doubts, even from OSI, very, very top people, even colonels that were our region commander. You'll never penetrate the football team. And I still don't understand why they had that theory, but I don't think that had ever happened. And to the magnitude of Operation Gridiron, I mean, we had literally half the starters under investigation. And I don't think that has ever arisen. I don't think they had a policy. I really don't think anywhere in the rules or anything like that at the academy does it say, are you allowed to play football while under an active investigation? And I think that's why they were asking, because they didn't even know. And I didn't know. And I just thought, what exactly like Melissa just said, the accountability piece, what message are you sending to people when you're saying, you know, especially to the victim, wow, here's the guy still playing and he's still a star and nobody cares, right? But I really do think, I don't think anybody ever thought that was happening. Maybe I don't think they ever had that type of investigation come up. And at the end of the day, I think who would want to lose half of their starters? I mean, from their perspective, not to condone that behavior, but I think they were thinking, we're about to go to a bowl game and I'm about to lose half of my starters. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, I mean, the recourse, right? Because, you know, imagine ESPN running a segment that, you know, half of the Falcons are no longer playing or under investigation, right? It would easily hit national news whenever you're talking athletes. And to kind of, I guess, explain a little bit of the demographics, right? You know, this isn't, and to Enos' point, it wasn't like a target of the football team, right? It wasn't like only football players, that's all we're looking at, no one else. No, like, I mean, if we looked at kind of like all the cases, at least in my experience, it was football players. There were some from other sports, and there was just some that was just like an average cadet, right? The majority, were athletes. I think that's a better way to put it. And if we were to kind of, you know, look at the demographic of athletes, well, kind of to what Miss Beasley was saying in the very beginning, you know, if you're coming into the academy and you're not an athlete at all, and I mean, like, that's just not what you do, right? The chances, or at least I guess the probability that you are going to be in the majority of those who assault are going to be, you know, a little bit slim. Athletes, at least are a little bit more outgoing, right? They're going to be a little bit more bold. They're going to push the limit a little bit more, have a little bit more of confidence to them. It makes sense. but at the same time, there's going to be that level of protection. There's kind of two layers, right? You're not only in uniform being at the academy, but you're also in uniform playing for your team, right? And this is coming, I mean, I played sports too. It's almost like there's this shroud that if a victim was going to come forward, it's not just the military persona that they're going to have to overcome to be believed. It's also the athletic, right? And I think that applies more to any civilian college and anything that you would see across the country, is that picture the star quarterback assaulting an average non-athlete female at any given college, and have her come forward with her story. It's going to be very hard. Now, put on top of that, being in uniform, being in the military, I mean, it's a wonder how anyone comes forward, to be honest with you.
And here's the demographic that shocked me. There's 4,000 cadets on any given day at the academy. 1,000 of them are collegiate athletes, intercollegiate athletes. That's 25% of the population there are athletes. So they're a big group. And the other thing is you're almost degraded if you're not an athlete. What's the term? NARP?
Yep, non-athletic regular person.
You're not.
Yeah.
I'm proud NARP.
And there was something called the TIZO gap, because that was that the athletes were up here and they had their special food tables, and they got out of military duties, right?
Yep.
And they got out of other things in the squadron they were supposed to be doing, but they didn't have to because they had to go to practice. So they had a lot of privileges too, and they were protected. I mean, above all, one year, I think it was 2012, 2013 was when I kept hearing, and we don't have to keep statistics on this, but I did, because more and more victims were coming forward saying, I was assaulted and he was a football player. I was assaulted and he was a lacrosse player. And these are the notorious ones: lacrosse, rugby, football, and basketball.
Yeah.
Those were the big groups. 80% that year of all our victims were assaulted by an athlete, mostly football players. And that—
Didn't you guys have like dances or something? Like
It might be ring dance, but that's more of a tradition for juniors.
Oh,
That's like the main big dance.
well, I'm just like, isn't there like a, like, I don't know, less aggressive way to approach like another female cadet?
That's a great
Take it back. Me and what?
That's a great point.
Well, me and Eric were talking about it. Like, so let's take like your basic, guy right out of high school. Hormones are raging on both sides of the equation, female and males, whatever. And, you're put in this position of, going to like an extremely rigorous college. And I don't know, but you're basically being told, don't touch, don't look. You can't do anything. And I think it sets up all these unhealthy ways for things to happen. What's like the medium? Is there like a medium line where,
I mean,
you guys converse like over hot dogs or something?
Well, being a dude and a former athlete at the academy, are there a lot of restrictions? Yeah. Is it tough? I think the female population at the academy is like, what, is it like 10% or something like that?
24%.
Yeah, and a portion of that are freshmen, going back to the frat point, which you're probably not even gonna you shouldn't at least entertain. I guess the point I'm making is there's really no excuse. You could go out to Colorado Springs and find a civilian girl if that's what you really want to do. If you're interested in something, I mean, there's really no, I guess, reason, right, to say, oh, everyone is just testosterone is flowing and super aggressive and everyone is just bottled up. No, there are smart ways to be stupid, I'll say it that way, that don't involve assault ever, or even a question of assault ever. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah.
Nick, you really hit the nail on the head. We kind of realized that they didn't know how to do healthy dating. And when we talked to them about the only time we talk to cadets about sex is about sexual assault. Think about that. You know, Missy, when you were there, we didn't have any talks and Eric on healthy relationships or how to date. And let's be honest, when you're a cadet, it's tough to date because you just don't have that much time. You know, you're always doing something or studying, and even lights out at 11, you're still studying. So you're kind of left with long distance relationships, and that helps great, by the way, because they're not real people. They're just someone online, and I say that in an almost joking matter. But we weren't talking about how to be healthy. How do you? They don't even know how to talk to each other. And cadets are seen as, and I don't mean to insult cadets, but they're kind of seen as awkward socially.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Yeah.
Across the board, like.
I'll put it this way. You ever like hear the stigma of like, oh, that kid is homeschooled?
That's it.
Yeah, there you go. It's like that.
It's like everybody's homeschooled. And they don't know how to communicate. They communicate through technology. So we started a program because the athletes were the most offenders, called Healthy Relationships. And we went in and we spoke to every single athletic team, my office and myself. And we got reports after every time we did that meet and greet, that Healthy Relationships. We'd get reports. That's when we had 84 reports. It was because people were coming forward because they see the SARC is not some scary, sexual assault thing, but we're talking to them about real life dating. And we would bring up SARky stuff, as they call it, SARky, when we'd talk about red flags or setting boundaries. That's how we talked about it. Not about, oh, don't touch them, you're going to go to jail. It was, what are some effective boundaries? So we kind of reversed, and we had a ton more reports. And that's when I got fired, basically. But we had.
But to your credit, that's good. But it still runs contrary to like having an event. Like I understand that part of the prestige of the Air Force Academy is that you have these people that are showing their commitment by rigorous work and long hours, but just saying like, hey, don't hit that person over the head, that's not a good thing. I don't really think it needs to be said. I think, is there nothing like even prisoners have rec time, is what I'm trying to say. Like, even they have like a time where like they can go out and like bullshit and
there's opportunity to do that. I mean, there's time to go out and have fun and whatever. I mean, depending on your class year, you might have more or less, right? Like as a freshman, you really don't. But as a sophomore going forward, you have opportunities to have fun and do something that's not military related.
Well, and there's one more caveat to that, and I'm not sure, Eric, when you and Missy were there. Was it frowned upon for male cadets to date female cadets when you were there?
Absolutely. There were so many jokes about how terrible it was to date another female cadet. Like,
don't do blue.
Like, what's up?
Don't do blue.
Don't do blue.
Yeah. Or what's the other one?
What?
Falcon goggles.
Falcon goggles.
Yeah.
Falcon goggles are like, basically it means like when you spend enough time at the academy, you find like ugly girls attractive finally, because a lot of female cadets are seen as unattractive.
Did you know that the athletic teams had bounties? If you dated if you were like on the football team and you dated a female cadet, you had to pay a bounty. Did you know that?
I didn't. I never heard of that.
What does that mean?
It means you had to pay for beer for everybody.
Yeah.
It's like
Oh,
a
okay.
shameful thing to date a female cadet.
Because they're not real girls. And I'd ask these football players when we'd have these healthy relationships, but that we would always bring that up because I said, guys, these female cadets are beautiful. I mean, they are. Look at, oh my God. I mean, and they're in shape, they're smart, they're funny. Who wouldn't want to date them? And the guys, the cadet guys called, I said, what's a real girl? A civilian girl.
Yeah, I mean, and look, there were some that at least, and I'll be biased here, there was some that was, I still remember, and I chuckle and laugh. And I think Mel was hitting it a little bit, but there was like these two scales, right? There was like, oh, she's real world cute, meaning like regardless if she's at the academy or not, she's attractive. And then she's like, USAFA scale cute or whatever, you know what I mean? So I mean, I think every year, every class, every what have you is always going to have kind of their own version of what we're talking about. And at the end of the day, especially your female athletes are probably going to err more on the side of being, and I don't know, maybe Miss Beasley could correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine if you're an attractive female and or you are a female athlete, your risk of being assaulted is going to be exponentially higher because you're going to be, if you're an athlete, you're going to be roaming around with the athletes, obviously. If you're attractive, you're going to be invited at the very least to hang out with a lot of the athletes, right? So if you are an attractive athlete, it's like, man, someone needs to sit down with her and break down just how high the threat it is, because it is exponential. You are going to be, and this sounds terrible, but I think it kind of point hunted in so many ways.
It is. They call the week after you're recognized as a freshman, they call that week Shark Week.
Oh, I heard it was open season. At least for my class, it was.
They're both, yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of things, yeah.
And it's not true because you're really not supposed to date a freshman until graduation's over. But they'll push it till, recognition in March. And, cadets are always finding ways to get around the rules. Just kind of one of them, you can't have sex in the dorms, right?
Yeah, it's a no-no.
That's a presumptive disenrollment now. But I guess it's okay to have it in Fairchild Hall.
What? In the chow hall?
Yeah.
Oh, no, if that was open, they would. But Fairchild Hall, it was called Fairchild Hotel when I was there. And I know it's fun, but that's cadet life.
I know, and it's terrible to laugh. I'm just remembering.
But it is fun. It's sad, but we had a ton of assaults in there, but we also had a lot of consensual sex going on in there too. Because the cadets figured, well, I'm not in the dorms, so I guess it's okay to have sex in Fairchild Hall. Plus, it's unlocked.
And I didn't. I'm not saying I did that, but I laugh because there's this saying. I think it's true. Was it be smart about being dumb, right? Yeah. And there's a line, right? Like look, and I've said this before. Man, there's certain stupid things that I did as a cadet that if someone in leadership was like, okay, yeah, you shouldn't have done that, I would have been like, yeah, you're probably right. It's not OSI related. That was a dumb decision on my part. I'll see my way out, right? And so, there's I don't think there's a cadet in history that doesn't have a moment where they look back and say, yeah, that thing I did was pretty dumb. And there's sayings across the board. That's why I'm kind of giggling here where, you think the military loves acronyms. Well, you should kind of hear the inside nicknames we give stuff, right? But at the end of the day, there's kind of this fine line between the two where, that's just kind of smoke and joke and having a good time. And then now we're crossing over into something a little bit more egregious and serious. And that, for example, there's a hotel right outside of the academy, and we used to call it like the Hojo, right? If I'm smoking and joking with a buddy talking about the Hojo Hotel, that's one thing. But what if the female sitting next to us was assaulted at the Hojo, right? So there's kind of like this unaccounted for kind of joking that can definitely trigger and goes to more of the culture of a victim wanting to come forward or deciding whether or not to come forward, right? Because even like just giggling, like I'm kind of laughing now and remembering some of the stuff we used to laugh about, you know, I can also see that, man, if someone was assaulted and we're joking like this, I can definitely see how it would be a triggering point for them or hinder them from coming forward. Because, you know, it like Ms. Beasley said, you could go to, you know, the academic building and some people have good memories and others have bad, and joking about it can definitely trigger some people. But I mean, I don't know. At the end of the day, I think that if there was a culture where there was accountability, right? I think you would have more of a what's the word? I don't know, humorous, friendly, fun time at USAFA joking about these things, because the lines would be a little bit more clear in the long run, right? Right now, it's a mess because there's no accountability, even if especially when you're an athlete, going back to the point.
Something you said, Eric, about accountability. Absolutely. When I realized that these were normal kids with normal hormones and doing normal college shenanigans or cadet shenanigans, I said, what do we do to reduce sexual assault, and how do we help them make better decisions? I think a lot of it comes, and that's what we did with the healthy relationships. Let's talk about what are good decisions. And I was so confused because they're so smart. So I went to the neuroscientist over at the biology department, and I said, how do you teach people whose brains aren't developed, who are underage 26-ish about, to make good decisions? And the neuroscientist told me two things. One is you have to be very clear about what expectations are, and that's what you just said, Eric. And secondly, you have to hold them accountable. And I think the expectations are very clear about what not to do, because, you know, there's the honor code, there's the cadet site picture, there's the UCMJ and honor code. There's many ways to hold cadets accountable, but I think sometimes it's just too hard. There's too many. And you can't be a human. You can't laugh and joke about it, like you said. You can't have conversations with somebody about worrying about, are they going to tell on you, or are they going to report you for underage drinking? Are they going to report you for frat? You know, it's a fear-based culture there in a lot of ways. But how do we unwind that? How do we set reasonable boundaries on cadets, and how do we hold them accountable? And that's what Brandon was doing, and what Eric was doing. And by speaking up, that's what Missy, you did too.
Yeah, you know, I think it's good to kind of make sure that at the end of the day, you know, the focus of what I did, what Ms. Beasley does, what Enos did, were for Melissa and those like Melissa. I mean, that's the central focus. I mean, that's why we're even on this right now, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? And that's what we're talking about. Everything else, you know, when we find what's tangent to it and what could be coupled with it, I think sometimes we kind of lose the center and just long conversations like we're having. That's at least, and I think I speak for everyone, that is the core of what we're talking about and what kind of brings everyone here today. And if we don't figure out how to not just hold accountable, not just communicate, not all these things that we're talking about, if we don't figure out how to fix this, right, going forward, I don't see in the grand scheme of things how we would be a strong fighting force. And I definitely don't see more women in uniform. I don't see a reason why they would. And so for me, I don't know, at the end of the day, for me, I think that Mel is kind of the spear point on all of this, right? And how we can better her, better others like her, and not just in the commercial sense, but in a real practical sense. I think that's where we have to kind of stay dialed in on. and I don't know, Mel, what do you think of, do you think that if you had a say in the manner to tell the, you know, say chief of staff or the superintendent, reinitiate the CI program or a program like Operation Gridiron, would that, looking back, make you feel more confident, more comfortable, have more trust in the process and in the system? I mean, I don't know.
Are you asking for me, Eric?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That was something that I didn't find out until I believe my case had already wrapped up. I think you had reached out to me and then your story came out and I was kind of like, wow, like if I had that, because these guys talk a lot and they go out a lot and they go out with their team. I'm like, if I had someone like you or you like there, I think that would have helped a lot. Or just knowing that I have that resource, at least like someone's on my side, but like even if it's in a behind the scenes kind of sense, because throughout those years while I was there, I was very, very alone and just fending for myself pretty much, just to feel like that there's someone who's trying to make things happen in the capacity that they can. That would have been a great help to me for sure.
Something I want to ask Eric and Missy both, and Brandon, you've probably heard this too. There's a thing called, Nick, there's a thing called cadet cynicism. And cadets I've asked many cadets, how do you become cynical? You know, because you're so gung-ho after you go through basic training. And, you know, some of the cadets that are there have wanted to be cadets since they were like 3 years old. I mean, this is a huge accomplishment. And you're oorah, you're gung-ho, you're ate up, however you want to say it. And I said, well, how do you become so cynical? And they said, ma'am, it happens when you go into your squadron after basic training and you do things the right way, the way that you were taught in basic. And then the cadets upper class will say, yeah, well, that's how you're taught in basic, but that's not how we really do it here. And I've heard that's the start of the cadet cynicism, where it's okay to break some rules, you know, it's okay to push some boundaries. And we've all said there's a lot of boundaries at the academy. I mean, it's almost like they need to be a little easier in some ways on the cadets. Give them a little more free time, as you said, Nick, a little more time to talk and hang out and be human, be college kids. But I think those two things are kind of important. They learn to break the rules the minute they go on their squadron. Have you heard, you know what I mean by cadet cynicism?
I do, yeah.
Where do you think it starts?
So I think for me, I think it starts with this amplification of making something minor major, right? I think, you know, for example, if I'm being screamed at that I didn't make my bed and so therefore airmen are dead, right? It's kind of like, huh, okay. You take that same principle and you know, someone gets away with something more egregious, well, then I'll probably be a little bit more cynical because, you know, how do you make this one minor thing over here, you know, equate to someone dying? And it's something that's more major, you know, it kind of slides by. But even with that said, you know, I try to look at kind of like the spirit of, say, a rule or a policy or a culture or spirit behind a principle, right? And then the practicality of it. But the turning point for me in what made me, I guess, just, I think it came down to more of this realization that perception is reality, that you could be a dirtbag cadet, but as long as you put this false persona on or whatever, well, then you're just a golden star guy, right? Even though you could be a dirtbag. That even those who would do the right thing and get crushed for it, or would even try to do the right thing and get crushed for it, but the person who did something blatantly false but just did a great job at hiding it, is considered the poster child. You know, that's kind of like, okay, well, what are we really doing? This is kind of like a game, really, right? Like, it's just the cynical side for me is just like, yeah, this, how can I take this serious, right? If the cadet that no one really respects in the squadron, as far as everyone kind of thinks like, man, this guy's somewhat of a prick, and that is the leading example of what a leader should be, then I'm kind of like, okay, well, what is this really about? He doesn't even care for the people, right? Isn't this about leadership? Isn't this about us trying to lead? So I think it has more to do with less focus on the intent and character of the individual and more focus on, do they fit the cadet handbook? Do they check those boxes, right? Because if more emphasis is put on a cadet being a good manager than a cadet being a good leader, I mean, that's what, to me at least, kind of seal the deal to say, okay, well, there's a bit of a game going on here.
Do you know that in surveys of cadets that have left the academy, that they have ranked leadership development as the lowest skill they learned while at the academy?
Yeah, definitely. I can see that for sure. For sure. Because here's the thing at the academy. If you try to lead, there's no room to make a mistake. Like there is none, right? You make a mistake, you could be hammered or you could be gone. You make a call, right? And you believe that was the right call for you and your subordinates. I mean, you could get hammered for it. And I don't mean hammered in the sense that oh, you just get demoted or something. I mean, like, you could be let go depending on what the circumstances are. There's every incentive not to do the right thing at the academy at the end of the day. I mean, that's what it boils down to. There's no incentive for me or for Melissa or for anybody to do the right thing, right? Because the right thing is going to come at a cost. And at the academy, anything that comes at a cost is paradoxically the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
I think another perspective on what contributes to cynicism is I think it's very, very difficult to put a normal teenager, because most of us come in when we're about 18 years old or 19 if you went to the prep school. You haven't really become a person yet. You haven't really become who you are as an adult. Those academy years are very formulative, and you expect to take this teenager and put them in a strict military environment for 4 years and make their socializing like time like very, very weird, because those are people that this is like your squad commander, this is someone of importance in your squadron, or this is someone you actually can't be speaking to. So these social interactions are very like awkward. But since the academy is so rigorous, we take so many credits. These are Ivy League level classes. Even if you don't play as an intercollegiate athlete, you're still expected to play sports. And you also have your military duties. So your weekends do not belong to you. A lot of them still belong to training in some capacity. So the only people who really succeed in that way are the homeschool kids, that they're just kind of weird, and some of them kind of thrive in this environment, but the rest of them, like people who aspire to have more like social interaction or go out, meet girls, meet guys, date, all of that, we don't have the time for that. So we're very like stunted in that way. And that stunting, I think, and not allowing you to develop yourself as a person, develop yourself as a leader, develop yourself as someone who could date other people in a respectful manner. It's just like, it's really not a priority. And I think to develop yourself as a person through those years, the academy kind of does a disservice in that way. Whereas ROTC, for instance, I can't speak to personal experiences there, but they go in and they do their ROTC class, and then they'll go out and do field training, but they still take regular college classes. They still get to be a college kid and experience that aspect of life and that aspect of being in your early 20s. We don't really get that at the Air Force Academy at all. And I think there are a lot of negative consequences to that.
Well, and not only that, I mean, it's tough to even find, like, and as she brings up a good point, like, even look at it now, right? I can't see now or see then a good example of say a commander or someone that I would say that guy is a great leader, right? I mean, I can't. We've been talking about General Gould, right? He was the superintendent, and none of us said, hey, General Gould was a fantastic leader. He's a 3-star general, and none of us have said he's a good leader, right? None of us have said the current superintendent, General Clark, none of us have said, oh, well, let's point to him. That's a great example of leadership, right? And I think that by default, there's a problem, right? If we all came from the academy, and there's not one leader from the academy that any of us have pointed to say, oh, that's a good example of leadership. Well, then that gives you an idea of the cynicism and the failures that's going on. Why can none of us point to a person to say, yeah, this is a good leader, right? I think what we learn and what we are learning, and the lesson that is still being taught right now at the academy that we're really talking about is how do we make the institution look good and preserve that perception, right? And that seems to be the lesson of leadership that's taught at the academy, right? The lesson at the academy in terms of what good leadership seems to be defined as is anything that protects the institution from negativity, anything that protects yourself from the perception of negativity, and that's about it. I mean, that's the lesson that's being taught today, right? And so I think we see, because you're going to have people that listen to this and they're going to say something along the lines of, well, no, in my experience, or I know this person or this AOC or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, but even today, I think that the outsider can say, okay, who at the academy is a good leader? And you're going to be hard pressed to find someone to point to. And if you can't find someone representing the academy as a good example of leadership, how do you expect the cadets to come out of that place and be a good leader?
Yep, I have to agree. So I think this has been pretty good. Probably should start wrapping up here in a little bit. So what do you think are the things that, I don't want to say could be changed, but what do you think are sort of the blind spots, and why do you think those blind spots exist?
I think one.
Let's say from the perspective of like General Gould, or the ranking generals that will come in to be superintendents at different military academies.
I think allowing people to learn from their mistakes would be huge at the academy, because you really can't. When I worked for the Marine Corps, they had a saying that you're not a real NCO until you've been busted in rank, and you're not a real officer until you've been investigated. And what did they mean by that? They mean someone allowed you to make a mistake or two and taught you through it and got you through it. And I'm not talking about a life's, the kind of mistakes that are, going to put you in jail or criminal behavior. I'm talking about underage drinking, maybe even that, or being off site when you're not supposed to be, or talking to a freshman when you're a senior. Really, these are presumptive disenrollment. Really, that's a little harsh. How do we grow people is, I've learned a lot more from my mistakes than I have from my successes. I just think that cadets are not given a chance, and then they learn, okay, I have to be perfect, or I have to give the perception of being perfect because I can't make a mistake because they're going to kick me out. And it's a fear-based versus okay, if your mistake isn't criminal, let's get you through it. Allow them to be human.
I would say on top of that as well, kind of along the same lines, but you were saying, General Gould specifically, or the people in those positions, would be to take a look at the convictions that we got, maybe even reach out and speak with these individuals and see how that impacted their life, and realize that maybe football wasn't as important as you thought it was. Maybe taking care of the men and women of our military probably was a little more important, because those games have come and gone. I mean, nobody cares anymore about the 2012 football team, and we should still be caring about our men and women that are serving. And I think that we really have underserved those. And like everybody else said, we have created a culture that we are now cheating and lying and stealing. Everything that the honor code goes against, that's what we have basically tolerated. and kind of see what you have created, this mess you have created. If you come forward as a victim of sexual assault, you better be prepared to get kicked out. That's not the culture we want. Have a safe culture where it's okay to come forward,
Well,
and hold people accountable.
pardon me for saying, but do you think they care?
I don't.
But do you think they care? Why do you think they don't care?
I mean, it was pretty clear. I mean, take Melissa, for example. I never had General Gould ask me for Melissa's case file. I never had General Gould ask me for any sexual assault case file. He wanted very specific things on football players, but that was a pretty clear message. When you're calling to see if football players are still allowed to play, if you're calling on football players and telling me, for example, one of the biggest examples was, he tried to call and say Asher Clark didn't really do it. See, in 5 minutes into the interview, he said he didn't do it. And I was like, yeah, he did something weird called lying. And then later on, he confessed. Like, I don't understand. Did you not watch the entire interview? If you're going to have that level of accountability, and you're going to scrutinize everything, why didn't you do that for Eric Thomas? Why didn't you go through and look at all of his, things? Why didn't you have that same level of oversight and meticulously documenting and looking at things? So no, they sent a very clelear message that no, we do not care about sexual assault. We care more about protecting the image.
I mean, we're pretty firm on the point that they don't care. But I mean, I don't mean to harp on this again, but why do you think they don't care? What do you like? Think about it from their perspective. Why do you think they don't care?
I think as far as General Gould specifically, he comes from a football background. He was very, very involved. He loved it. He even served on the BCS board for a little while until he was removed because of the investigation of the things that I brought up on him. But he just really loved football. And I don't think, and maybe I could be wrong, but maybe it's the same reason that we talked about earlier. Maybe as a man, we just don't understand the impact because we haven't lived through that. Maybe that's one of the reasons. It's hard to say, but that could be a very good reason. I don't know.
What do you think about money? He's not under control of the fucking Dalai Lama fund. He's under control of the $100 million military industrial complex fund. Along with that, I did a story a few days ago about a similar situation, only it didn't involve sexual assault, it involved cheating at the United States Military Academy or the Army Academy. During the coronavirus, obviously a lot of people were working remote and so were cadets, and of 73 who were suspected of cheating, 52 were NCAA athletes. And could you guess what the military or what the United States Military Academy did?
Right, slap on the hand.
They retained the athletes.
Yep.
No guess, yeah.
What I'm working with as far as the theory goes is that the athletes who maybe share the strife and the camaraderie, whatever you want to call it, of working on a sports team definitely creates an insular other members within the whatever military branch they serve. And it seems almost so silly, but it goes pretty far, that would have these people that go into these things, they come out being like heads of major corporations, CEOs of major corporations. It's something we didn't touch on a lot in this podcast, but the power that they're able to wield and the money that they're able to hold on to, I think is something that they definitely, I don't know, it's enticing, you know. I think just put it in this framework that, you know, sexual assault is bad and you shouldn't do it. I mean, I 100% agree with that, but looking into like the reasons why, I mean, I don't think we've really even scratched the surface on that.
I think Melissa, I think you were going to say something about why you thought that as well. I don't know if I interrupted you, but you probably have a very good perspective on that.
The blind spots.
Well, actually, what you continued was kind of what I was going to say. It was just kind of these generals who get to that point. A lot of them did come from the academy. They were athletes themselves. Maybe they were in a position where their buddy back in the day sexually assaulted someone, or they came from an environment where it was all guys in their class and they were very anti-women being incorporated into it. So they are still from that old mindset. And the thing is, we keep recycling this because the academy culture is still terrible now. So what happens when these officers who are currently in, or these cadets who are currently in, become officers and generals? Like, they're gonna be like, yeah, I remember when I was back in the academy, my roommate, he sexually assaulted someone, or he had a sketchy situation with that girl, but like at the end of the day, like, it's better off that he's a pilot and she got kicked out, or you know what I mean? It keeps self-perpetuating and just kind of like garbage in, garbage out.
I think that for the same reason that a cadet won't do what's right or shies away from, especially sticking up in, you know, a sense for a victim, but more broadly to do the right thing. For the same reasons that the cadet won't do it are the same reasons why the general won't do it, right? It's just on a different scale, okay? And so I think your question, Nick, was, you know, why don't they care? Well, if you didn't care as a cadet, you didn't care as a lieutenant, you didn't care as a major, you're not going to care as a general, right? And the reason I think that stems from day one all the way forward is because it's more, there seems to have, or maybe we lost it, I don't know, but there doesn't
Sorry.
seem, there doesn't know what
I cut out there. Could you, my connection died. Could you repeat what you just said?
I didn't even get to it because I'm trying to put the words to it.
Oh, okay.
There is no value to doing what's right anymore. And so if you can't figure out how to put a value on what's right and devalue what is wrong, well, then there won't be a change, no matter what the topic is about. If we can't figure out as a freshman cadet that the right way is often the hard way and it comes at a cost, well, then as a general, doing what's right and the hard way is still going to come at a cost. But if you didn't learn that as a cadet, you're not going to do it with stars on your shoulder. So I don't think, I really don't see how you change that unless you begin to see people at the end of the day say, I'm doing what's right because it's right and I don't care the cost that comes with it. Until you start to see that, until you start to live that, walk that, breathe that, you're not going to have a change because there's more value in doing what's wrong.
I think a lot of effort has been put into that to answer that question, you know, and you know, well, victims weren't represented in court, so we got them in a special victims council. We didn't have well-trained OSI agents, so we started training OSI agents. And now they're looking at, I understand, giving witnesses of sexual assault who come forward kind of leniency or no, you know, granting them immunity. for coming forward. Now they're looking at that. So, but we still have the problem. We've done all these things. I think we've done a lot of stuff. So why isn't it fixed? And I think the first reason is because it's hard. It's hard to do the right thing. It's hard for people like Eric to go in and stop a football player. And the guy with you, he got hit, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
He got punched out. Claxton was a big guy. And for Missy to come forward and bear through being retaliated against, when we told her on day one that we're there for her and we're gonna give her all these great resources if she were to be assaulted, and she did not find that to be true. So she was alone. So I think it's hard. Secondly, people just they're uncomfortable with the topic. One exercise I've done with groups is like I say, Nick and Brandon, I want you to pair up and decide which one's going to be the speaker and which one's going to be the listener. And okay, you've done that. Now, the one that's the speaker, I want you to tell the other one about your last consensual sexual experience. And what? No, we're uncomfortable with consensual sex. How on earth are we going to talk about rape or sexual assault? I mean, it's just an uncomfortable topic, and it's hard to believe that my own mother, before she passed away, I don't know why people tell you those things, Teresa, because we didn't talk about them, because they're awful. They're horrible things. They're crimes. They're what they do to people is it crushes their soul. I mean, they can have issues for a lifetime. And I've heard it's a crime against the soul. I mean, it's, to me, second next to murder. But you live. You live and you keep going. And it's horrible, and it's uncomfortable to talk about.
And not only that, let's going back to the second point you're making, Susie, think about, and not use specifically, but I guess, for those listening, for Mel to be here and give not only her perspective, but her story, and to have done it in the past, and then to put it out in today's technology, like right now, where you undoubtedly are going to have people who are going to give their 2 cents that are just going to be knuckleheads, who are, or in some cases, you may even have people that will still try to attack Mel, right? Not only is it a topic that no one wants to talk about because it's dirty, it's awful, it's evil, but even those who talk about it, every single time they do, they open themselves up to having people attack them, especially online, right? Especially with like a podcast or whatever. So if you wonder, why do people not talk about it, aside from like what Ms. Beasley just outlined, because it's something disgusting and horrible and terrible. Well, it's also because you're going to have people who are victims who've never shared their story, and they're going to read comments of people coming at Mel, and they're going to say to themselves, I'm not going to do that. Are you kidding me? I'm not going to put myself through that. Right. And so there's echoes of what we're talking about that happens at the academy, that just happens in society. And if people are wondering, why are we not addressing it, talking about it, or why are victims not being more vocal and more strong about it? It's because of I guess, what's the word, re-victimization, or the simple fact that even today, and I'm sure Mel, tell me if I'm wrong, there's going to be moments where she, despite what I say and what Enos says and what Miss Beasley says, she's going to feel alone when she sees that stuff, and when people point fingers and when they come at her, right? And she's still going to feel alone, right? And so that, at least in my opinion, as an outsider looking in, that I think is somewhat of that X factor as to why this is so hard to not just fix, but to just talk about. But I could be completely off too, so if I am, let me know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think let's kind of pull this thing to a close here. Hopefully we can reconvene in the future, and I kind of wanted to discuss more on the background and what's been going on as far as because a lot of this were like situated around arguments. I mean, great, but I kind of wanted to know like more of the details, and hopefully we can get to that. 'Cause I've been working this for a while now, and I know that there are a lot of details, very interesting things that we hadn't even come close to like touching on. So with that said, does anybody want to give any final words?
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for keeping the conversation going and keeping it in the present.
Yeah. You're really thinking too much of me, right? Like, let's tone it down. I'm just trying to like make a career or something. Right?
You're just trying to benefit off us, okay?
Don't worry.
You're going to get promoted over all of us now.
I'm working for
As
myself,
Brandon
so I mean, maybe I'll give myself an extra Kit Kat at the end of the day. I don't know.
Okay. You deserve it.
Oh yeah. Is everybody good though?
I think thanks for the opportunity. I think that all of us have had kind of like our own individual stories, and our stories have been out in one avenue or another, but I think I told everyone this even before we did this whole thing, that this was pretty unique, pretty different from what we're used to. And I think it's a little, I mean, I don't know. I think it gives you a little bit more perspective, a little bit more detail. So yeah, I don't know if we would do it again or not, or what have you, but I think it goes a long way.
All right. Well, I'm gonna. Hey, Eric, can you switch the host over to me?
Oh yeah.
Real quick? Okay.
I don't even want to do it. Okay, there it is. There you go.